Good day, I'm Dr. Brad Smith, Chief Science Officer of meQuilibrium. I'm glad you could join us for a look at the power of meQuilibrium's insights and analytics. Today we'll spend some time talking about how our insights can help your workforce, whether they're at high risk for behavioral health conditions or whether they're showing high potential for advancement. Without further delay, let's jump in. We're going to talk about three things today. First, we'll talk about identifying and addressing risks with meQuilibrium's insights. We'll talk about population analytics to build on strengths that you may already have in your workforce. And we'll talk about Beyond Static, a sneak peek at meQuilibrium's self-serve reporting tool. So first, let's talk about risks. How can meQuilibrium's insights help you address risk in your population? Unless you've been in a cave for the last 15 to 18 months, you have seen media reporting about the tremendous impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on mental well-being. It's been in the media everywhere. One of the most common reporters of mental well-being trends has been the Kaiser Family Foundation. And data from just a few months ago this spring indicated that about 1 in 3 adults, employed adults, were experiencing symptoms consistent with anxiety. 33% of the population. About 1 in 4 adults was experiencing symptoms consistent with depression. And given that anxiety and depression often co-occur, perhaps as many as 50 or 60% of people have both, about 40% of the population was reporting symptoms of either anxiety or depression. So the impact is incredibly widespread, probably twice to 2.5 times what we would expect with the normal prevalence of these conditions in the population. And even as the lockdown wanes, the negative mental health effects of the pandemic are expected to linger. If you heard our founder, Jan Bruce's talk at the keynote on the first day of the conference, you would have heard her say that as many as a third of the population is expected to suffer PTSD related to COVID as they return to work sites this fall and next spring. And that's entirely consistent with the data we saw from our own self-checks that showed about a third of the population having signs of COVID-related PTSD just this past December. So it's clear that risk is very high across the workforce. As many as 40% of the employees who are returning to site, or not in some cases, may be dealing with symptoms that have important impacts on productivity. The research shows that someone with depression misses about 32 work days a year more than someone who doesn't. So that's a serious impact on productivity in your organization. The experience suggests, more importantly, that fewer than half of the folks who are affected, who need help, will present to a healthcare provider or a behavioral health provider to get that help, either due to stigma or thinking it's normal that they should feel the way that they do or that they've always felt that way. The great thing about meQuilibrium's organizational resilience solution is that we can help identify those folks, but more importantly, we can also route those folks to appropriate resources, both inside of the meQuilibrium product, as well as within your existing benefits programs. So whether it's an EAP or a digital coaching solution or what have you. So how do we identify risk accurately and efficiently within the population of members? Our depression and anxiety insights were developed using predictive models based on items from our 92-question validated assessment. These models were trained on a PHQ-9, Physician's Health Questionnaire 9-item depression scale, and GAD-7, the Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7-item scale. And these are the gold standards for screening for these two conditions. If you've been to your family doctor in the last few years and you've been screened for either depression or anxiety, I'm confident they use portions of one or both of these tools to do that. So they're very commonly used. And while we're working on a new generation of predictive models this summer, the first generation of these models that's employed in product right now is highly accurate at identifying folks who have and who don't have high risk for depression and anxiety. So how do we know they're accurate? Good question. We're able to check the accuracy of our insight predictions using a large validation data set, where we ask individuals to complete both the meQuilibrium assessment on one hand, as well as the PHQ-9 and GAD-7 tools on the other hand. And what this gives us is an opportunity to both see what their actual depression and anxiety scores are on these two instruments and to triage them as depressed or not depressed and anxious or not anxious. And then also run their data through our predictive model to get their predicted depression scores or their predicted anxiety scores. And what we see for depression is that in this validation sample of over 2,000 folks, 91% accuracy in terms of identifying people who are depressed and people who are not depressed and correctly distinguishing them. So 9 times out of 10, better than 9 times out of 10, we're able to do that and find the people who need to be found in the population. For anxiety, the accuracy rate is slightly better, still over 9 times in 10 accurate. So accuracy of identification, that's obviously important, but what's more important than that is acting on it, doing something about it. You may be thinking through all the data that you ask your employees to complete, and we know that employees these days are, in many cases, over-surveyed. And you may be thinking that your health risk assessment, or HRA, already identifies risk for anxiety, depression, stress, eating issues, what have you. And it's true that most health risk assessments do include items that tap stress levels, as well as anxiety and depression symptoms. The big difference is that HRAs can really only assess risk and can't mitigate risk. So my experience in the payer world suggests that really what happens with HRA data is it goes into a database, and then if an employee calls in for assistance to the health plan, then that data can be accessed by a coach. But there's no proactive reach out. There's no way for an HRA, the data from an HRA, to help proactively reduce risk in your population that I know about. And the great thing about meQuilibrium is that in complete confidentiality, meQuilibrium identifies individuals in need and then delivers personalized assistance. So our algorithm develops a personalized journey through skill building content, content modules, and activities that allow opportunities to practice the key skills in building resilience. And we're able to deliver that personalized assistance both through coaching in the product, in the meQuilibrium product, as well as intelligent navigation outside the product to an EAP or a fitness benefit or a financial stress benefit, or for depression and anxiety, maybe a coaching or some sort of other digital therapeutic. So the insights, in addition to being a great diagnostic, the ability to identify folks who are at risk for depression, anxiety, and other conditions, they're also a useful outcome measure. And so they help us know who we are helping and how many people we're helping inside of the product. And across the book of business, what we see is about a 13% reduction in the number of individuals with moderate or worse depression symptoms. And for anxiety, the numbers are even better. About a 21% reduction in the number of members who have moderate or worse anxiety symptoms. So we're helping a huge number of people after identifying the product, both internally through the product and through routing out to EAP and other resources in your ecosystem. So that's how we can help identify and, more importantly, assess risk in the population. Let's change the page and talk about how you can use our population analytics tools to build on your strengths. In terms of developing strengths in your organization, we've seen how the power of data can be used to identify and address serious behavioral health risks, but they really hold equal power and promise, our analytics do, and data, for identifying and building on strengths. And coming up now on the next slide, I'm going to show you a heat map that displays anonymized data from a customer showing the pattern of resilience factors, selected resilience factors. We have 18, I'm not going to show all of them, but across various levels of the organization, from individual contributors at a fairly low level to high level managers and leaders. So here's that heat map. And a heat map, if you're not familiar with a heat map and what it does, it shows you variation within data. And in this case, the variation is sort of whether people are doing well compared to our book of business norm, or whether they're not doing well. And it's not individuals, but it's segments of the population. So across the top of the chart, in the columns, those are selected meQuilibrium resilience factors. So we have primary factors, including things like emotion control, emotion intelligence, empathy, positivity, self-confidence, and a set of supporting factors: energy, focus, purpose, support system. And going into the details of our factors is really beyond the scope of what we have time to do today. Please reach out. If we could give you a tour of those, we'd be glad to. But down the rows, where really the meat of this heat map is, are different organizational levels within this organization. So we have MDs at the top, a pretty high level leader, officers, professional staff, support staff, a group of folks for whom organizational level is unknown, at the bottom, VPs. And so what the heat map shows in this case is, again, deviations against the norm. So green means a segment of the population that's doing on average better. Orange to red colors, yellow, orange to red colors indicate a segment of the population that's doing not as well compared to our book of business norm. So you don't have to be a data scientist to see a really clear trend in this chart. And that is that top level managers, the MDs in this case, show particularly high scores on stress management, engagement, emotion control factors. So these are folks that have their stuff together, and it shows in their factor scores. It may be part of how they got into a leadership position. It may be that they're offered additional opportunities to develop. But one of the great things that shows the power of meQuilibrium's digital resilience training is that even in this population that's very high performing on average, we're able to help them, even in the areas where they're the strongest, which is great. So everyone has the opportunity to improve, even the folks who are at the leading or the bleeding edge. And what we saw in that high performing group of MDs, we saw significant improvements from engagement with a product. Things like a 50% improvement in stress management, even on top of them being 14% above the average. We also saw a 12% improvement in engagement, again, even on top of being 14% above our book of business norm. But we also saw a 22% improvement in emotion control. And emotion control, just to give you a little tidbit, that's really the fundamental skill behind resilience, understanding the relationship between how we think and how we feel. And you can get control of that and understand that the sentences that we say to ourselves in our heads, that really drives how we feel. And if you can control those thoughts before they become feelings, that's the power of emotion control for improving resilience. So there's, in addition to helping people just through the normal activity of the product, right? So these folks, the MDs or the officers, the profs, they all have unique journeys tailored to their own specific needs. So they're getting the help that they need up front and improving in those things. So even in addition to what happens inside the product, meQuilibrium has ways to help folks who are on the other end of the spectrum who might not need help with behavioral health conditions. Let's talk about those briefly. So in terms of developing strengths, how else can analytics and data from meQuilibrium help your organization build on those strengths? Several ways. So one is through values match. So every company has its values statements. In most cases, we're able to map at least a subset of those values to meQuilibrium factors. And so that values match feature really allows you to track how factor change and how what people are working on the product tracks to your organization's values and improvements. So are people engaging? You can find out how people are engaging in activities that help boost your organizational culture and boost the values that you share with your workforce. Another way that meQuilibrium can help folks who are on the other end of the spectrum is by identifying folks, for example, with high factor scores across a number of factors, and then offering them mentorship opportunities through meQuilibrium's mentor match feature. So what this basically offers, it's a total opt-in program. So individuals who might have high scores in emotion control or empathy, for example, would be offered the opportunity to become a mentor. People who have low scores in those areas would be offered an opportunity, again, totally opt-in, to become a mentee. And then there's a matching process that works to match strengths with opportunities for improvement, and a structure around that that allows people to meet a limited number of times to work on those skills that will be mutually beneficial to the two. So it gives a great mentoring opportunity to the folks who have strengths in these areas, but also benefits organization in ways helping people who might be struggling a little bit with certain factors. And thirdly, in addition to its preventative role, intelligent navigation can also be tapped for people who are not at risk. And this is really only limited by the imagination that you might have as a human resources leader or as an organizational leader, a learning leader. We're able to work within your ecosystem to do almost any kind of mapping and navigation that would be helpful. So one example here is if you wanted to identify people with high potential for leadership and look at a pattern, we could actually do the analytics and show you the pattern that your leaders exhibit in terms of factor scores, emotional intelligence, empathy, emotion control, support system. We could profile profile a set of factors and then identify other folks in product who have a similar pattern, other engaged members from your organization, and then use that information to route high potential for leadership employees to content maybe in your LMS or somewhere else outside of meQuilibrium to help you develop the strength of your organization. So in addition to what we talked about up front in terms of helping identify risk, meQuilibrium's data analytics also have the potential to help you help you develop the strengths in your organization. So I want to close out with our third agenda item, and that is taking a sneak peek at our self-serve reporting tool. And one of the things that seems to be behind customers selecting meQuilibrium is the way that our rich analytics distinguish our offering. So when customers provide us an eligibility file, things providing demographics, for example, or work unit or level or manager status, what have you, we're able to give HR and business leaders really throughout the organization, as far as you want to share it. We're able to give everybody insight into what's happening across the organization down to groups of size 20. And until recently, we displayed that data in static reporting tools, either a PowerPoint or a PDF. It's all stored in our Tableau business intelligence solution. And while that's worked for the last several years, really it's kind of unwieldy for exploration. What we want to do is take the power of that data and put it into your hands as a customer of meQuilibrium to help you be able to explore it on your own. We're certainly standing by to help advise and help you learn how to use the tools. But we want to put the data in your hands, the most powerful data we have in your hands. So we're excited to announce the pending availability. Date is a little bit TBD, but should be this fall, at least in limited release. But the pending availability of a self-serve reporting tool. Let's take a look. I'm going to do some swapping here with sharing to get to the right screen. Excuse me one moment while I do that. So here is the front page of our reporting tool, and this is meQuilibrium Self-Serve Reporting Tool. Currently, the product is unnamed, but we'll call it Self-Serve Reporting for now. The cover tells you where what client you're looking at. You'll really only get your data. It's all very carefully and securely segregated, so your data remains your data only, and no other customer will be able to look at your data. And we'll click into the product with this chevron here. And this is a beta release, so it may be a little slow. You might find it a little slow, so bear with me. So this is a standard menuing across the top. You can click to get back to the cover here on the meQuilibrium icon. Across the top are the different features, and what I'll do is walk through these pretty quickly. But there are a couple of reports that are really designed for sharing, for snipping or grabbing a screenshot and dumping it into a PowerPoint to share either down your organization or up your reporting chain to leaders that you may report to. What's different about these reports, which if you're a customer, you may be familiar with, what's different about these reports is the ability to drill down. So currently, most of our reporting, a good bit of our reporting is focused only on population level, broad population level. And this gives you, across every report that we have in here, the ability to look at any subgroup, size permitting, but any subgroup across your population. And so you'll see certain navigation features in on most all of these views. This is the filtering menu at the upper right-hand corner. And by clicking on the filtering menu, you can drill down into up to 8 standard subgroups. Ultimately, this depends, what's listed here depends on what's on your eligibility file. Obviously, if you don't send us demographic data, we can't tell you who's male and female or what age group they're in. But also has the capacity for up to 10 different custom groups. So if there's a specific way you like to look at your workforce, whether it's geographic site or whether it's employee level or manager status, with that eligibility file, we're able to custom develop reporting groups for you and allow you to explore them through the reporting tool. So you'll see this hamburger menu on all of the views that we look at today. There's also the ability here to look at either baseline or current values. So baseline would be what your population looked like when they assessed initially. Current would be how they look now. So that we offer an opportunity every 90 days to reassess, to let you know how you're doing and how you've changed in terms of interacting with the product. And you're also able to look at norms. So one of the questions we've dealt with a lot over the last year is, so how does our population that assessed in 2020, right, in the thick of the pandemic, how are they different than populations that assessed before? And so what we're doing is opening up the norms now, freeing the norms, as it were, to let you look at your population compared to really any time period in the reasonable recent past, and then across a variety of industries. And we expect these list of norms to grow over time, but currently you can compare yourself against, it looks like at least 10 different industries and over 5 or 6 different years, as well as an internal comparison against your own company or your own organization. So on the resilience profile, this is a bit of a scorecard style report. So you get an average MEQ score in your population. You know how you stand compared to the book of business in this case. You get a view of your key sources of stress, and the black line represents the norms in this case. You get a look at the resilience factors. Here's all 18 resilience factors in 3 groups: primary, supporting, and somatic. And finally, you get a look at selected insights. So the anxiety insight is triggered as moderate or worse anxiety in 28% of the population. So this is almost twice the norm. For burnout, it's 19%, again, almost twice the norm. For depression, a quarter, 1 in 4 people. So this helps you take a quick look at how your population is doing at baseline, and you can share this around your organization. The executive summary is a similar scorecard style report. So it's really designed for a visual presentation. The great thing about this report is that it has all the same filtering. So you're able to drill down to any custom or standard reporting subgroups that we might have. And you're able to also look back in time. So April, May, March, as far as back as your data with meQuilibrium goes, we're able to let you see that historical data. The key difference between the executive summary and the resilience profiles we looked at a moment ago is this is really focused on enrollment, engagement, and efficacy. So how's your population doing in terms of enrolling? We have incredible bests that can lead to as many as 40 to 50% of your population enrolling in meQuilibrium or more. Again, great customer success reps that can help you build best practices for engagement as well, so that you can see upwards of 40 and 50% engagement in the population, and then also powerful efficacy or outcomes. And so one of the ways we measure that is through the Resilience Indicator Index, or RII. And this really shows about a 25% improvement in each individual's lowest 4 factors, their drags, as we term them. So people are improving as they engage with the product. All filterable in the same way that we talked about. If you want to drill down and just grab a spreadsheet, I won't show you this, just to keep things moving. You can actually pull all this data out into a spreadsheet. And it's a Tableau-based install, so you can download it as a PowerPoint. You can download it as a PNG file and drop it into your own document. And you can also download, in many cases, data that's here. So if you wanted to do further analytics or share an Excel out with people, you'd be able to download the data from this. So a quick look at enrollment and engagement. We'll spend a little bit more time on enrollment and treat engagement rather quickly, since it's very similar display. You have the ability, one of the questions we spend a lot of time fielding in the sort of peri-launch period, the period around launch of a new customer, is how are we doing in terms of enrollment? And what we're doing here is putting daily updated data in your hands, so you can know how that email that your executive sent out last Tuesday impacted enrollment rates. Did you see a spike? So this is currently displayed at a monthly level. This would not be very helpful for understanding the impact of specific marketing efforts, but you're able to drill down and look at weekly counts. And so this is the count of people who've enrolled each week, or to drill down even further and look at daily counts. So that here on January 13th of this year, this customer, demo customer, must have had something that went on. They had an enrollment count that's 3 times as high as any other day on the year. So this is likely you can a helpful way to understand the impact of the marketing efforts that you're doing. Timelines are, again, adjustable as you need. Same filtering tools here. And you can also see here, we give you some comparisons about how your population is doing compared to our norms. So in this case, this customer is a little bit below, at 20 months in, this customer is a little bit below the enrollment rate benchmark for our best practices customer. Engagement is much the same display. We don't allow you to drill down to a daily basis here because the data are simply too voluminous. We have so much data on customers that it tends to overwhelm the reporting tool. And so we let you look at a high level in terms of engagement counts. Same date filtering, same look at benchmarks, and you can know how your engagement rate is doing compared to our best practices customers. Same filtering tools as we saw earlier as well. So let's move on and talk quickly about factor scores and insights and change. Factor scores, this gives you the heat map that we were looking at in the presentation a moment ago. This is our new branding, so the colors are a little bit different. In this case, blue is good and red is not as good. And so these are the same norm deviations for a population. And in this case, it shows age and business unit and a variety of other groups. So you're able to scroll down actually through this and look at any subsegment of your population. One of the great things about this tool as well is that there is interpretation built in. So if you hover over a cell that shows a positive benefit or a positive impact in that group, so this is the 18 to 29 age group, shows actually a relative strength in physical activity, being exercising and taking good care of their bodies. As I hover over that cell, you can see interpretation pops up on the right that shows the benefits of improving the physical activity factor. Or in this case, if I hover over motion control, which is a challenge, it's not unusual that we see emotion control being a challenge in younger populations who have less life experience. But as I hover over that, you can see that emotion control, the interpretation switches and shows the potential risks of low emotion control scores. So in this case, it's potential drops in team efficacy and other changes. And for both strengths and opportunities for improvement, we provide suggested content and products. So change your mind would be a good skill for folks to use there that really gets at the fundamental tools behind having strong emotion control. You can look at, again, same sort of norm comparisons, and you can drill down into whatever subgroups you have in your eligible file. So we can provide very granular reporting across your population to help you identify potential hotspots. And again, same filtering tools here as available throughout the product. The insights in the self-serve reporting tool, we have all 7 insights that are reported here. And they show in much the same display. Everything's a risk in this case, everything's positive. And so we see 18 to 29-year-olds having about 34% anxiety risk. So they're one of the highest. The least anxiety risk is in the older group, 60 plus. So we see the ability to, again, scan through a population and look for hot spots. That's why one of the reasons it's called a heat map. And so we see Boston. It's a fairly small population, but the Boston population of this organization has particularly high anxiety and depression risks. And this can spur you on to ask why, what's going on there? Is there anything we need to do to intervene beyond offering and suggesting people enroll in meQuilibrium? So insights tells you a little bit about population risk in whatever corner of your organization that you might be interested in. And the last segment we'll talk about today is change. And so change allows you to look at 2 kinds of change. One kind of change is factor score change. So how are people improving on the 18 resilience factors that we talk about in product and that we report on? And in this case, you can see the largest improvement in the population is in stress management. All, again, filterable down to whatever segment of the population that you're interested in. We're also providing insight change. So you can know something about risk reduction. A few minutes ago, we talked about book of business risk reductions in depression and anxiety. For this demo customer, you see a reduction in anxiety risk slightly larger than what our book of business shows, about a 20% reduction. and about a 28%, again, slightly larger reduction in depression risk in the population. So you're able to not only assess risk, but see how the product is doing and the intelligent navigation tools are doing in terms of reducing risk in your population. The last segment, which is totally blank, is an outcomes section. And it's totally blank because this is an opportunity for you to share out your data with us. So we're a data integrator, and we can take your leave data or your healthcare claims data and put it in here, anonymize it, keep it safe, and then put it in here as a way that you can look at the impact of resilience training on the kinds of outcomes you and your business leaders care about. If you have productivity data from a sales force, or leave data, disability data, what have you, we'd be very glad to talk to you about ways that we can help you tell a positive story about resilience in your organization using those data. So that's it, really. We've come to the end of our time together. I appreciate you sticking with us through the end. Well, we've talked about today 3 things. One is the power of meQuilibrium data for identifying and assessing risk, particularly behavioral health risks like depression and anxiety. Our data are unparalleledly accurate in terms of identifying risk, and our data also show that risk is reduced over time. So meQuilibrium can help you reduce risk. We also talked about how meQuilibrium data analytics can help you build on strengths, and whether that's using mentor match to help people, give people an opportunity who have strengths in certain areas to share that strength, or whether that's using intelligent navigation to identify high potentials and refer them out to something in your LMS. And then finally, we've talked about and given a sneak peek of our self-serve reporting program or tool, which provides you access to explore your data at will and not be limited to what we're able to put on a static page or dump into a PDF. So again, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to connecting.